we've kind of lost what is fact, what is science, what is truth. It's the adage that everybody is entitled to their own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Michael.
I'm Brandon Whitworth. Together, we created the World Without Cows documentary, where we explored the complexities behind what might seem like a simple question. Would we be better off in a world without cows?
We had conversations with farmers, with ranchers, with scientists, and lots of others on the front lines of food production and environmental stewardship. And what we do here really is dive deep into what's a nuanced impact really of cows on culture, the economy, the environment, even nutrition.
This podcast is an extension of those conversations as we continue to explore this evolving conversation about the role of cows in shaping our world. Our guest today is Jay Waldvogel. He's recently retired from a long career with Dairy Farmers of America, where he served as Senior Vice President of Strategy and International Development. With over 25 years of experience in the global dairy industry, including key leadership roles in Europe and New Zealand, Jay's become a trusted voice in the field. Though retired, he's still actively contributing to the industry. He serves on various boards and working on meaningful projects like dairy development in East Africa and creating carbon credits in developing markets.
Jay, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Gosh, the last time we sat down was the interview for the documentary. How does it feel now to see yourself on the big screen?
Horrifying. Horrifying. I don't think anybody should ever be experiencing themselves at like 8 gazillion times size. So it's a bit horrifying. Almost hard to pay attention when you see it.
When you watch it, you've probably seen it a couple of times now.
Yeah.
Was there anything that surprised you, something you didn't expect?
I don't know if surprise is the right word. I think when we had a chance to meet, that was really early in your process. So I didn't have so much an expectation to say, well, this is what I think they're going to do. So now let's reference what that original thought was versus the end product. So it's less a matter of surprise and just a sense of real, I don't know what the right word is, pride in what you did, right? Really amazed at what you were put together. So it was not so much a relative statement of what I thought and what I got, and more just an absolute, wow, that is really nice work you did.
Really appreciate those kind words. Thank you.
We get asked a lot about what were the people's reactions as we reached out to them, as we reached out to you and said, this is kind of the concept. And people wanted, like, why did people participate? What was their interest level? You seemed pretty in from the get-go. Like, this is a story that needs to be told. In fact, you had kind of already told the story in a different form.
Yeah. So for me, it was just really happy that somebody was picking up this kernel of an idea who had, by all initial accounts, and certainly by the end result, the resources and commitment and, most importantly, passion to deliver it. So it's a story that needed to be told. Like I've told a lot of people, whether you look across the industry more broadly or this topic specifically, all the stuff is there, right? All the dots are there to create a great story. We don't do that part very well. We don't tell the story very well. And so the belief that you guys are going to take up all these wonderful little pieces and connect them into a story, yeah, how could you not be all in on that from the first moment?
To be fully transparent, the way we found you was this kernel of an idea that you just talked about, you referenced. Tell us about that idea. I mean, this concept of a world without cows, somebody had already briefly discussed it.
So the idea of a world without cows comes from conversations, at least from my perspective, there are other ways it can come out, was the group Global Dairy Platform meets once in a while. Globally around the world, people come together to discuss the issues and challenges in dairy. And we're constantly bombarded with the negative, right? Dairy has been defensive for some time. And part of the reason it's been defensive is that if you take dairy apart, you take anything apart, you can find things to pick. And there are legitimate concerns. Not just environment, there are other issues around dairy that you can bring up. And so as a sector, as an industry, we become very defensive. And so we have these conversations in hopes of trying to find ways we can position ourselves more positively, kind of bring it back to the whole story. Because when you look at dairy holistically, look at agriculture holistically, the positives far outweigh the negatives. Don't ignore the negatives, but they far outweigh it. And how do you get people to have that conversation, to think more about the big picture? And you get to this perspective of black and white, all in or all out. Now, the answer is always in the gray. It's always in the middle. So nobody's suggesting that you take those extremes. But the extremes force you to think differently about what that middle could be. And so we just came together with a view and said, well, what if we just took it away? What if you just eliminated it completely? That gives you a different starting point for your conversation. So my introduction to World Without Cows was really kind of a group think around what you can do to get people to at least think differently, consider differently.
To that point, the documentary that we produce doesn't push an agenda. Really, what we want to do is spark deeper, meaningful conversation about these complex issues. Do you think the documentary can do that?
I absolutely think the documentary can do that. And it's the way you've positioned it. I mean, it's positioned as a start for a conversation. It doesn't provide a solution. It doesn't provide a recommendation. The challenge is going to be, how do you actually get those conversations not only started, but productively executed? We're in a world today where people are more entrenched than ever in their position. What's right is what's wrong. Less and less likely to accept a fact as a fact. And it's going to be an issue for both sides. Not only can you get those who have a negative perception of animal agriculture, of cows, to openly think differently, but can those of us on the side of cows being part of the solution be open and listen to the faults we have? Can you use this as a way to find the middle ground? Does a documentary create a platform for that? Absolutely. Does it mean it will happen? I hope.
I mean, to stay on the topic of conversations, I think everybody that we've talked to throughout this process and even recording podcasts agrees that conversations need to happen, they need to start. But you, out of anybody, really hit home with the point of inviting all those perspectives. You even talked about how at previous conferences you would go out of your way to invite those outside perspectives to give that sense of a different kind of reality of what's out there. Why do you think it's important to not just shut down that conversation, to invite those into the circle?
I think that there's two reasons for it. One is you can never get too comfortable in your own belief that it doesn't be a belief you're perfect, but a belief that you're right, that you're on the higher ground. As soon as you get comfortable in that, you're going to stop moving forward. Forget everything else. You're going to become set in the place that you're at. And the second one is, oftentimes the best advice you get on how to evolve and improve comes not from those who live it and breathe it, but from those who look outside and say, well, that's what could be better. That's what might be wrong. And as soon as you close yourself off to that, you're not moving forward, you're not growing, you're not doing anything. So it's not a defensive, we have to listen to them, otherwise no one will believe it. It's very much an offensive, we should listen to them because they can really help us. And I think in all the conversations that I've had with people on the other side, you learn something, and it helps you a little bit somewhere.
To that point, say you're not involved in farming and ranching, you're not on the beef side or the dairy side. What are ways perhaps you could get involved?
Ooh, that's a good question. Involved to what end, I guess, is what I would ask.
This conversation, solutions to help us move toward a future that we can all share and that we can all move in the same direction.
Yeah. I think if you're not involved in farming and ranching, so let's say you're a consumer down the street, as an example, and you have a concern about climate, you have a concern about the future of the planet, or more importantly, humanity on the planet, and you want to find out what is or isn't right about the planet, this is a great way to get introduced to what animal agriculture is, to get introduced to what actually happens on a farm. So you can take an hour and a half of your time, watch a beautiful movie, and come away with any level or different degree of knowledge you want. Basic understanding of how farming works, all the way down to the science of how greenhouse gases work. And if you take the time to do that, then you start to find the questions I want to know more about. Because it doesn't, as you say, provide all the answers. That was interesting. I know more about agriculture now. Well, tell me more about how this regenerative ag thing works. That's the thing I'm interested in. Or maybe you want to find out more about the science of carbon dioxide in the air versus methane. Great. And even I think you guys have provided a website that allows access to get that level of detail. You can grind into what you might want to know more about. So this is a wonderful entryway to somebody that doesn't just describe the science, doesn't just describe the fight, doesn't just describe the negatives or the positives. It describes and tells the story of animal agriculture and cows. And you can pick your own path.
Interestingly enough, I mean, the battle we have really right now is misinformation. When you say you're referring people to the World Without Cows website, why is it important in this day and age to look to the science for these answers?
Science is always the base, and this is one of the things where we've kind of lost more recently. Again, what is fact, what is science, what is truth? So, the adage that everybody is entitled to their own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And providing that science background oftentimes today doesn't provide the answer people want. You need the story around it. But if it's not built on science, if it's not built on fact, it's a house of cards that tips. So you need to have it. And I will say that there's a number of people in this conversation who maybe don't want to go that deep. Maybe the story is enough to give them a position. Maybe some want to go a little bit further and find out some things. And maybe there are some who need to go all the way down into the depth of the science. Making that available gives people those options. It creates an open conversation as opposed to, as you said, directing somebody to the story you want or directing somebody to the one fact you want. So making it all available is important, I think.
Part of these conversations and part of the documentary that we tried really hard to do was show how these food systems and the challenges are not the same across the world, right? The challenges in the States is different than the challenges in Africa. In India, you've done a lot of work in Africa. I want to quote something that you said
deep trouble
in the documentary. It's a question you posed that I think is a really important question that gets brought up a lot, I think, in these conversations. As you look at those challenges, Jay, you said, how do you go from incremental improvement, small pilots or in small groups, to actually fundamentally transform these food systems? Conversations are nice, but how does that happen?
How much time do you have? I'll fire off an example, and it's not that this one example is applicable to every situation, right? Every situation has its own nuance, its own difference. And there are even some situations where dairy doesn't apply. So I'm going to talk about some of the work we've done recently in East Africa, specifically in Tanzania, and kind of give you a roadmap. But it's a roadmap we're trying to duplicate in many other parts of the world. And in fact, it follows roadmaps that have been successful in other parts in the past. So if you go to Tanzania now, it has all of the elements you need to be successful. And it has all of the needs that you need to want to be there. It has the right climate for dairy. It has land. It has the right water availability in most places. It has a young population. It has a large herd, very inefficient herd, but they're familiar with animal husbandry. They appreciate milk, but most of it is sold in an informal market. And they have incredible issues with stunting and wasting and malnutrition, and an economy that needs anchors to boost it. So everything that you need to be successful in dairy is there, and everything that dairy delivers is needed there. But when you walk around and you try to figure out, how do I connect all of these dots? How do I make them all work together? And in the very first instance, it's just basic information. It's sharing what a farmer in the state of Wisconsin would just automatically do as a matter of instinct, with people who don't really know how to make that first step. Then it's trying to understand, how can you get people who have a history of subsistence farming to become professional farmers? And to be clear, professional farming in an environment like Tanzania is 5 cows, right? The video showed the story of the gentleman in Kenya who has a handful of cows, but he's a middle class. He has hired help. He has children who go to school, medical school. So you don't need to be a huge farmer to be ahead economically. How do you get the education to become a professional farmer? How do you get them the tools to be smarter at how they feed their cattle, how they care for their cattle, the animal health they give their cattle? How do you get the right genetics in place? But more importantly, in those markets, how do you then create a market for their milk, a real market? How do you get consumers involved? How do you get policymakers to support it? Now, all these things incrementally are doable. Collectively, they're really hard. So what we've done, the program work that we've put together with the members of Global Dairy Platform, these global dairy companies around the world, none of whom economically benefit from anything we do in Tanzania, with support from traditional NGOs, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, others have stepped up and provided money, working with local groups, but also working with organizations like EFAD, put together a plan led by Bain Consulting that says, how do we make a sustainable value chain? How do you make the plants work better? Using expertise from companies like DFA to go into these small plants and say, how do you run them better and smarter? How do you make the quality work? Using Land O'Lakes resources on the ground to say, how do you educate that farmer, provide extension service? Working with people to figure out how you can get feed to these farmers who often don't have access to land so they can get better health in their animals and get better feed quality. How do you work with the government to create a policy that says, here's how you encourage a formal milk market so people can get safer quality milk? How do you go from programs in the past that were incredibly well-intentioned that said, put a cow in every backyard? Fantastic. Except that there's no place to sell the milk, the cow eventually disappears.
Yeah.
Let's give kids a glass of milk at school. Wonderful. When that grant money runs out and that free milk's unavailable, there's no milk in the system. How do you build feed supply into farmers, professional farmers, into processors who are efficient in what they do, into markets that actually function, are supported by policy that means it will go on and on in the future? And when you walk away, it's not starting over from scratch again. Everything is there to do it. Everything you need is there. It's just getting it lined up. And there is a small issue of money that comes into play as well.
I just want to tell that story about this small shareholder farmer in Kenya that we talked to. You know, part of the conversation in the documentary is that we can't grow herd size because of emissions, because of pollution. And the conversation is to make the cow more efficient. And you talked about basic animal husbandry. By animal husbandry, for people who don't understand, it's just day-to-day care of the animal, right?
Yep.
So it was quite shocking to me in Kenya to see, when it comes to basic animal care, something so small as, let's show this farmer how to make his cow more comfortable so that the cow produces more for him. And it's really those small steps. I thought that was quite striking. Do you see that frequently?
Yes, and that's the difference between, in many cases, like I say, a subsistence farmer. It's a backyard cow, provides milk for the family on occasion, but not a professional farmer who knows how to manage his cow. Whether it's still just feeding himself and the neighbors or being part of the formal chain, it's a huge difference. And if you equate it to the environment, one of the projects Global Dairy Platform has been going on now for a few years is called the Pathways of Dairy Net Zero. And what that program does is it looks out and it says, how do we create the tools, to your earlier question, to actually help farmers achieve a lower footprint, progress toward net zero, whether they get there or not, progress toward it. And looked across a number of different business models, how farmers farm, from large, complex housing systems to Maasai pastoral systems, to sizes from 2 cows to 20,000 cows, in different markets, different geographies, different climates. And what are the tools you can apply in those? And how do you get those tools available for everybody? And the interesting part is, if you look at a developed market like the U.S. where we're at here, roughly 40% of what it would take to get to net zero is best practice, better animal husbandry, things that have no regrets, that when a farmer employs, they're almost always getting a positive economic return. Better manure management program, better animal health care, fresher water for your cows all the time. The other next 30 to 40% is things that we already have available to us but need some kind of an economic model to work. Right? It might be, who's going to pay for me to do a cover crop? The manure digester is a great idea, but am I going to get enough money for the gas or electricity? So they're there already. We just need to make them economically function. And the last 20% is probably over the rainbow. But it's not impossible to imagine getting there. It's things like CRISPR technology for genetics. It's immunization for methane, which is probably closer than we think. But the amazing thing is, you can take all of those tools, and if you have a professional farmer, like the farmer in Kenya, 5 cows but a professional farmer, You can put those into his system. You can give him the basic no regrets, more comfort for your cows. Keep it out of the mud is going to make it produce more. Fresh water is going to be better for it. Better genetics. You can actually follow those from the most developed market and over time put them in the developing markets and have amazing results.
Jay, to me, that seems like a monumental task, trying to solve all these issues. And with learning the doc that by the year 2050, Africa is going to have a huge population boom representing 25% of all people on Earth. Jack Bubba says within the next 30 or 40 years, we need to produce as much food that was produced in the last 10,000 years of human history. So with all of these compiling factors, what in the end actually gives you hope?
We have done big things in the past, right? This is not easy, but it's far from impossible. And the thing that gives me hope specific for the dairy process is that the resources are there. They're really there. The commitment is there. I don't just mean on the side of dairy wanting to get better. I mean, there are people out there who are willing to roll up their sleeves, willing to invest in making this work. The missing piece is just getting folks on the ground, again, to connect all those dots together. It's not something that is inconceivable we can do. It's all right there in front of us. It's just hard work, committed work, and stick with it. And the other thing is, it's not ultimately, this isn't a nice to do, right? This is a must do, right? We can go to the moon. It's nice to do. I don't know that it serves any great purpose, but it's pretty cool we could do it. This is something we need to do. We need to feed people. We need to improve their livelihoods. And this is right in front of us as the ways to do it. So just get busy.
Yeah, Justin Sherrard says in the documentary, we have to get all of this right, or we're forever going to be catching up in ways that we can't. Yep. Do you think we can do it in a timely manner?
So I've told this before, and I'll split it between develop and developing. I think if you look at the developed world, and we're specifically talking here about dairy, I have every belief that dairy in the developed world could get to net zero. Whether it does or not is a different issue. Will that happen in 2035 or 2040? I'm not sure. But as I said, all the tools are there. The resources are there. In that place, you have funds available because you have consumers who are willing, in some cases, to invest, but you have returns to farmers. So I think that model is set to run. Hard work, right? But that will run. Can you get in front of the 80%? If you are not willing and aligned, you will never get in front. And again, this is not the first time people have tried this. If you look at dairy again specifically in some of these markets like East Africa, there's hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent in dairy development. You can't see it on the ground. There's not a long-term commitment. There's not a willingness to follow through and build the chain. There's a willingness to do something incremental in the moment. That willingness, we're going to test it, right? We're in the middle of testing it now. And part of it is issues like what you're doing here with World Out Cows. Can you get more people aware of the importance of that? Because as you said, and as Jack says, and as many people say, if you don't get in front of it, nothing you do here, the developed world goes to zero. Fantastic. You're overrun. The tsunami is coming. And that solution is the one that's critical if you believe there's a problem. If you really believe there's a problem, you have to get in front of it out there. It's a must do.
Jay, you're retired now. Congratulations.
Yeah. All you gotta do is get old.
What sorts of things are you doing? How are you still active in this area of interest?
Yeah, so the main thing I do is nothing. I'm getting really good at doing nothing. But there's a couple projects I'm still working through that are really supporting this, that are, as much as anything else, passion projects. The work we've done in Tanzania, and it connects to the previous questions you had, there's like 3 different elements of what it is. Build a model that will work, a sustainable model. Engage all the stakeholders to prove it. And we've done that, right? We've proven that this is a model that can help transform the sector as opposed to just make incremental improvements. And we're in right now the last year of a project we have to actually develop all those proof points. Proof points that ultimately we will be using in other places around the world. So it's not just fix this, it's provide that roadmap. That's one I want to see through, and I am. The second one is, now how do you get the funding to actually start to scale that? And we have a project, Global Dairy Platform, together with others, with the Green Climate Fund that is putting up a $1 billion fund to address 10 countries around the world to do just this: use dairy as an anchor, use dairy as a base, and use it in a way that is going to improve the environmental footprint. And the first 4 countries, the first $400 million is East Africa. And in fact, if you marry it with some other existing funding there, it would be nearly $700 million available to scale up the work that we've already got on the ground for pilots. So how do you go from pilot to scale? And then the other project I'm working on is the next step. So if I can get largely grant money and concessional debt that comes from folks like the Green Climate Fund, then what's the next level of funding you get to further scale it and sustain it? And that's looking at how we can get carbon credits that function in developing markets. How do you go to markets where they have no interest in insetting because consumers aren't going to pay for differentiation? They have desperate need of funds coming in, and they don't have exports. You're not exporting dairy. Dairy's purpose is to serve the local populations. So how do you get that to function? And carbon credits could be a wonderful way to unlock value, to bring value into those farmers who are doing the right things. That's a whole different conversation about how hard that is. But if we can get those two things right, then you've gone from exactly as you talked about, the nice conversation, it'd be really nice if we could make this all better, to, well, wait, here's actually models at work. We've tested, we've proven them, we've worked across the chain. Here's funding to get them scaled. And over the way, here's funding to get them up and running at commercial scale. And when you look around in whatever that window is, 10 years' time, you'll have a fully functioning, economically viable, sustainable, delivering all the things we talk about that dairy can deliver, that anchor for society, for economies, for nutrition. It'll be in place. And I'm not going to give up on that just yet.
Does that sound like retirement?
No, not at all.
No, I'll be honest with you. You called it a passion project. Yeah. And I think your voice is very valuable in this conversation. So the work that you're doing, I can't wait to see how it's going to progress and what changes could come in the future. So thank you so much for sitting down with us again, and look forward to watching all of that unfold.
My pleasure. And again, I've said it a million times, and I'll probably say it a million more. And thank you so much for what you've done, for taking that kernel, taking that idea, and doing exactly what you asked me. How do you execute it? Just like you did. Beautifully.
Jay, your voice of common sense, of vision, of passion. Can't thank you enough for being a part of this conversation, a valuable, trusted voice in this documentary. Thanks so much for sitting down with us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find the World Without Cows podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Or check us out at worldwithoutcows.com to learn more.